Buenos nachos and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode we're going to be working on this no entiendo switch. It has a damaged USB-C port, HDH-001. Without further ado, let's begin. I've already taken the liberty of removing the screws off of this console, and there is what we're dealing with. I do have a couple more screws to remove, that way we can get to this USB-C port. So let's go ahead and remove the rest of the screws and then we'll proceed to the soldering. We have the main circuit board removed out of the Nintendo Switch. As for the damage on the port, let's go ahead and zoom in on that and see how bad it is. Oh yeah, you can see a couple of those pins are really pushed in. So yes, definitely needs a replacement. I have my bottom heat right here and we're going to put the board on the jig and we're going to position it in a certain way, that way I can easily remove the USB-C connector. So we'll go ahead and start preheating. I will be using hot air, so we're going to go ahead and use some Kapton tape. So we'll go ahead and cut up a couple slivers, and reason being is that there is a port right next to where we're going to be heating up everything, and that port is right over here. Probably have some weird disorientation thing, so it probably wouldn't hurt to put some more Kapton tape down. I'm going to use some of the thicker, wider stuff. We're using two pieces of tape, one to shield the port from getting melted and the other to hold the board in place. And we'll be putting that one to hold it in place right over here on this side. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some low melt solder and we're going to turn on our vacuum. Don't really get too many opportunities to use this low melt solder, so hopefully when we use it, it's actually worth it. And I am applying some flux. We'll of course be using our Hakko soldering iron. We're going to use the T15 D24 tip to start off, and I'm going to be at 450 C for my temperature. And our bottom heater looks like it's already warmed this thing up pretty good. I'm going to lower my temperature down to 350 C, that way I can go over these legs. And you just want to get them coated. Alright, and now we should be ready for some hot air. It's been a while since we've used this noisy beast. I did not expect this layout for this USB-C port, but that's okay. Amazingly enough, that's a no connect and that's also a no connect over there. So we just need to clean up these pads and then we can go ahead and attach the new USB-C port. Of course, want to be careful with our desoldering in this vicinity. Almost thought I melted my glove there for a second. And you do want to be careful with all the caps and resistors that are in the vicinity. And I'm going to slowly pass over these pads, that way we don't disturb them any further. And this is just to clean up any residual low melt solder. Before we proceed any further, let's make sure our replacement USB-C port fits where the previous port was. So let's go ahead and place our replacement here, nice and slow. Ah, yes, that's perfect. So at this point, you're probably wondering how I'm going to tackle these pads right here, because I obviously can't get in there with my soldering iron. What we're going to do is we're going to coat those pads with some leaded solder, and then we're going to put the new port on, and then we're going to use hot air to go ahead and have it settle in. I want to use alcohol over here to clean this, but we got some heat going. Just fine. And we do, of course, want to be gentle over these pads that may have loosened up ever so slightly. All right, let's go ahead and add some flux, and then we're going to add some leaded solder. And what I'll most likely do is clean up the spent flux after we're done applying this new leaded solder. My coffee is definitely kicking in. That was just a little bit too much solder towards the bottom, so we're going to have to use our desoldering wick, and we're just going to pull off an ever so slight amount from right there. And now I'm going to clean up the flux that's been spent, and then we're going to put some new flux on there. We'll go ahead and add some flux, and then we'll be ready for our reattachment. And I will adjust this ever so slightly. And right there looks like a solid placement without any skew on the pads right back here. I just want to get this tacked down ever so slightly. And I think now is the time to switch out to a different tip. So we're going to switch out to the T15 BC1. It's not our finest tip, but it'll help us get into some of these tougher spots. Alright, so at this time we're going to add some more flux, and we're going to bring the hot air back online. Probably would benefit us to put some new Captain tape on that side, so that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, let's just put a little sliver right there just in case. Let's turn on that hot air and get things flowing. We'll go ahead and turn off our bottom heat, let the board cool down, and then we'll perform some touch-ups on those legs. So it does indeed look like our Captain tape did its job. However, it does look ever so slightly tinged from the heat, but that is way better than what I expected. We won't have to replace that port. Ideally, you want to have no melting at all, but what can you do? So first things first, we want to go ahead and inspect all of these legs. So we're going to add a little bit of flux, and then we're going to go over all these legs with our soldering iron tip. It's not as much as I wanted to put on there. I think I'll use some of this finer solder. That way a ton doesn't dispense out. Just go ahead and melt away some of this flux real quick. That way I can see what I'm doing. It's looking like we might have to take it to 450C. I don't think this tip is going to cut it. We're going to switch to our T15C1. We really need to get in those tight spots. And I don't want to do any further damage to the plastic on this USB-C port, so that's why we're switching to the smaller tip. Alright, let's go ahead and clean up this spent flux, see how we're looking. We're of course going to be using our MG Chemicals 4140A flux remover. Probably would want to use a Q-tip that doesn't have any fibers. I think what I'll do is I'll actually use our brush. So we do have a bridge from the looks of it. Otherwise I'd say these joints are looking pretty good. This one may need a little bit of work. But yeah, we'll want to take care of that bridge and I think we'll be golden. Let's go ahead and just get this cleaned up a tad and we'll spray this down. So I'm going to add a tiny bit of flux and a tiny bit of flux over here. We'll go ahead and clean that off in a second. Alright, let's get our desoldering wick, which doesn't seem to exist on this side of the building. And now this side. Alright, let's go ahead and clean that up and see how it looks. Let's go ahead and do our rake test and then we'll put the console back together and test it out. Or really, I guess it's going to be our pushing test. Get some alcohols in here and we'll blast away this stuff. How does the back look? Did we do any damage to the back? Nothing seems to be missing or dislodged. We'll go ahead and remove the rest of the flux and then we'll go ahead and put this back in the console and see what happens. Alright, so we have most of the Nintendo Switch console put back together. So let's go ahead and plug this in and see what happens. So here we are. It's a pretty decent fit. And it looks like it's charging. Well, at this point I'd say it's safe to say that we can put the remainder of the console back together. We'll go ahead and do that off camera. And we do have a charge. 8%. It looks like we successfully repaired this no entiendo Switch console. If you found this video helpful or useful, please remember to leave us a like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Until next time.